The midnight hour was fast approaching as a nearly lame mare trudged into the quiet, drowsy village of Stinking Pork. Atop the steed sat Albert, a young man of slight build whose mount struggled to carry him after weeks of arduous travel from the northern reaches of the Virginian protectorate of Serdia. Despite his relatively tender age, the man had grown accustomed to such a life. When he made the most pivotal decision of his existence years ago, he knew full well what he was signing up for. Weary, parched, and famished, he arrived at the village center, a mere dozen houses clustered around a sandy crossroads where a paved thoroughfare once proudly stood. The empire had vanished from these parts ages ago, and with it, the grandeur of the local infrastructure. Without hesitation, Albert made his way to the largest edifice, evidently the sole tavern in this woeful settlement. 2 dreary lanes appeared deserted. At this late hour, the villagers were either asleep or lingering in the tavern. In his youth, Albert had regarded such places with disdain, but years of wandering had inured him to such sights. The tavern was sinking into a somnolent torpor. A bored barmaid wiped tankards while an older man, presumably her husband or father, began shuttering the windows. The sight of a new patron at this hour intrigued the woman.
"How may I assist you?"
she asked, raising her gaze from the mug.
"It's unusual to see a fresh face here at this time. The area hasn't been as safe as of late."
Well,
Albert replied.
Certain adventures delayed my journey. I had hoped to arrive here several hours ago.
He glanced at the taverners preparing to close up.
You are finishing for the day. Any chance I could order a hot meal or something to drink?
The barmaid exchanged looks with the older man before turning back to Albert.
"Very well, this brief moment won't be our undoing. Besides, that one is loitering here anyway."
She pointed to a sleeping drunkard.
"Have a sit. I'll fetch you something,"
she added, heading towards a steaming cauldron over the dying fire.
"Speaking of which, what about him?"
asked the surly tavern keeper, indicating the sot.
"Do we have to drag him home again? Is that a specialty of our dive?"
The barmaid cut in firmly.
"Oh no, I won't let him slip in the tavern."
Evidently, it was rare for this connoisseur of drink to stay the night.
If my fare is still warming up,
Albert interjected.
I can help. Why not? Just point me where to take him.
"If you want, you can haul him to this old lady. I'm not touching him."
Albert never knew how long he'd spend in a passing village or town. Sometimes work came up for a few days. Occasionally he'd stay somewhere for weeks or months, though he tried to avoid such situations. One could never be too safe, especially with such powerful figures breathing down his neck. Gaining the favor of locals like the village elder, tavern keeper, or herbalist could be worth its weight in gold in times of crisis. Exchanging knowing glances, the taverners acceded to Albert's offer.
"If you want, by all means,"
grunted the older man without a shred of warmth.
"But don't count on free food and drink."
He waved towards the exit.
"He lives in a hut by the crossroads, green shack on the way to Long Farm. You can't miss it."
Smiling affably, Albert rose from the table, approached the sleeping drunk, hoisted him under the arm, and dragged him towards the door, bowing politely to the tavern keeper. The frosty air struck his face. At least it wasn't windy or raining. The thick, fur-lined cloak that had served Albert so well last winter was lost during an ill-fated hunt. Well, better to lose a garment than one's life, he consoled himself. Now he wore only a simple black hooded tunic, leather trousers, a white shirt, and a dark vest. Sturdy boots and a hunter's leather belt provided some protection against the cold. With brisk strides he reached the indicated hovel. He knocked on the rotten door. A light flickered within. Irritated by the prolonged moment, he knocked again. The reeking drunk was beginning to weigh on him.
"What?
A shrill female voice pierced the silence.
Is that you sot?"
Your husband is here,
Albert explained, abashed.
but he's not in a state to talk. Could you open up, ma'am? I'll hand him over to you.
Grunts and curses preceded the rasp of a bolt being drawn back. In the doorway stood a woman of unappealing appearance.
Slush to the grills again. And who might you be?
She eyed Albert suspiciously.
A new drinking body?
Before he could explain, the woman summed up his efforts.
Why'd you drag him here to me? So we can reek and hooch some more? If you found him in a dish, you should have let him there. I'd have some blessed peace.
She prattled on incessantly. Albert had no intention of prolonging this pleasure.
Please, take your husband.
He interrupted her firmly.
And I'll stop bothering you. Should I just dump him on the doorstep?
She gave him a hateful look, then shot the drunkard an equally affectionate glare.
Hand him over.
She spread her arms. Albert approached, transferred the body, and was about to bid farewell when he heard,
And don't you lot drag him here to me again. And quit your boozing till midnight.
Hard to explain, I have nothing to do with him.
Albert thought resignedly. Without a word, he turned and walked away. He just wanted to eat something hot. He hadn't had anything cooked in his mouth for 2 weeks. On the way, he nervously checked his bag. The scrolls, whose theft had sealed his fate, were still there. Those scrolls, crucial to his grand plans for the Empire and the world. Nervously checking them had become a conditioned reflex, like breathing. With relief, he entered the tavern, though the shutters had already been closed.
I delivered that gentleman home, into the arms of his loving spouse.
He smiled at the young woman finishing her chores.
Would you deign to serve me that fare and drink?
Yes, here you are.
She set before him a bowl of steaming goulash and a mug of beer. Albert snatched up the food, eager to dig in, but hesitated.
Might there be a plain water, perchance? As long as it's clean.
The barmaid gave him an astonished look, but shrugged. She wanted this day over with. Reaching under the counter, she pulled out a second mug and poured water from a pitcher on the bar. Albert devoured the goulash in the blink of an eye and drained the mug. He tried not to eat so ravenously, knowing how it could end for a starved stomach, but he couldn't control himself. Hunger had plagued him for many days. Licking the spoon, he extended the empty mug towards the barmaid. She reluctantly grabbed the pitcher, approached, and began to pour. And then, something strange happened. Albert abruptly withdrew his hand, set down the mug, and gripped the edge of the table so tightly the barmaid spilled water on the floor.
What are you doing?
She yelled.
Give me that.
She trailed off, seeing Albert's look. Thoughts of supper, lodging, and rest evaporated. An odd unease pierced him. The table shook as if something immense and monstrous was approaching the village.
Do you want this water or not?
The woman snarled.
You made me waste half a pitcher.
But Albert was silent, staring at her with disquiet. The tavern keeper also fell silent, as if sensing something ominous descending upon stinking pork.